Hey guys, welcome to GearHeads. This is Jesse, and if you've been around long enough, you know that I'm Matt from the previous videos, and today we're going to show you how to turbocharge your Miata. Now, there's a lot of options and a lot of routes to consider when turbocharging your Miata. There's a lot of parts to consider as well, and today we're going to review the parts that Jesse has to turbo his Miata and the way that we're going to do it. In addition to that, there's a lot of other upgrades to your car that you're going to want to consider, and we're going to talk about that a bit later. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Jesse, and we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about the parts that we do have today.
Yeah, so before I start showing you guys all the parts, it is worth mentioning, like he said, there's obviously tons of different options out there when you're trying to pick out parts. Like, you know, there's probably hundreds of different intercoolers you could choose from. I'm not going to talk about all the different options, but I will show you what I'm going to be using and talk about that, and I will give worthy mentions to other things that I think are worth considering. Now, if you're watching this video, you're probably trying to do it yourself. So obviously there's kits out there you can go and buy. You can go to Flying Miata, you can go to Bell Engineering. I think they have a new website now, but that's besides the point. There's Fab 9, and there's a whole bunch of other ones out there that do offer really good quality kits. If you have the money and you want to make it easy, go for it. And it's also worth mentioning, if you live in a smog state where you have to smog your car, Flying Miata actually does sell carb legal kits now. So if you can afford to save a bit longer and buy that kit, it could totally be worth it because it'll make your life a lot easier and save you a lot of headaches. I didn't do that obviously because I did it before Flying Miata had started, you know, doing the carb legal kits. But I made my own kit that's very similar, except for the fact that I added, you know, engine control, engine management on top of it. So anyways, we'll talk a little bit more about that as I get into talking about the Megasquirt and stuff. And so, and you said this is about how to turbo. Not really. This is, you want to turbo your Miata, this is all the stuff you're going to want to think about and all the stuff you're going to want to know, and it's all the parts that you're going to need to do the job. We will be doing videos in the future on how to do each of these steps. We already have a couple of them done, and it's going to be a process over the next few months of doing the project. But be sure to come back and look in the description of this video. If we've already done it, there will be a link to that project and to that video and how to do it down in the description. So be sure to go down there and check it out. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and start showing you guys the parts and get into what you actually need. So the first thing you're going to need to consider when you want to turbo your car is you need to set some goals. So first you need to set a power goal, and you also need to set a budget goal. So my power goal for this project is going to be around 250 wheel horsepower. That's a reasonable number, and it's about the upper end of the safe limit for the stock motor and also for the rest of the drivetrain. The truth is, you get up to 300, 350, even if you build your motor, now you're going through transmissions, now you're going through differentials and axles, and you have other problems to deal with, which makes things a lot more expensive and complicated. And honestly, 250 wheel horsepower Miata is super fun to drive, and for me, at least for now, it's enough. I think someday if I get past that, I'll probably move on to a different car, or I'll just do a whole V8 swap, maybe on another one. Ooh. But this is my baby, so I'm gonna keep this one turbo. But that's besides the point. So the other thing besides setting your power goal is your budget. So my budget for this one's gonna be somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. Matt and I actually did do a video a long time ago. I'll try and drop a link in the description on it. And we were sitting in front of my computer and we made a spreadsheet list going through all the different stuff. Right. Yeah, so if you have more questions and you want to get more info, go watch that video. And I don't remember what budget we came to because I think we were setting one up for his car and it was a little less. But in any case, my goal is 250 wheel horsepower, and it's going to be around $2,000 to $3,000 for me to do that because of the parts that I've chosen and what I want to use. So just keep all these things in mind. There is ways to do it cheaper, and there is ways to do it more expensive. Now I'm using engine management. I'm going to be using a Megasquirt. But if you're really going budget and you don't want to get more than maybe 150 to 180 wheel horsepower, you could do an adjustable fuel pressure regulator with a timing box so that your timing gets retarded under boost and so that your fuel pressure goes up and you're still using the stock computer, and basically when the adjustable fuel pressure regulator sees boost, it clamps off the return line. And so the fuel injectors get more pressure, so they're putting more fuel in. But that pretty much maxes out at around 100 and 80-ish horsepower. Good luck getting past that reliably in a good way if you want to do it that way. And the problem with doing it that way to me is it's so cheap and easy nowadays to just get something to, get a replacement ECU. There's like the Speeduino units, you can build those. You can build your own Megasquirt if you don't want to go buy one. There's definitely tutorials out there on how to build your own. It's something I'd actually like to try eventually, so maybe someday we'll have a video on that. But in any case, these are, like I said, all things to consider and think about. The thing though that's a problem with doing the adjustable fuel pressure regulator and timing box is, by the time you buy those, you pretty much have already spent a few $100s, maybe up to $500-ish. And then you're stuck at 180 horsepower, but the exact same kit with just bigger injectors and a fuel pump could probably make well over 200 horsepower, and it would be easier to deal with and tune. And then also, like I said, you're pretty much you're stuck there for no reason, because you could totally just go buy a Speeduino kit or a Megasquirt DIY kit and build that yourself for around $300 to $500. So in my opinion, that's the way to go, and it's not even worth messing around with the other things. So let's show you the first thing, and that's going to be the Megasquirt. So this is my Megasquirt 3X. This is, at least when I got it, it was closer to top of the line. I think it's still really good, but I think they do have a couple things now. I think some of their newer plug-and-play units are almost like equivalent of what this thing can do. It's about 4 or 5 years old now, but when I got this thing, it was a smoking deal. I think I only paid $300 for it, and it was built by a very reputable member of the Miata Turbo forums, and it worked really well for me so far, and I'm going to continue to use it on this build when we get it into this car. So like I said, look for used ones like I did, and I got a good deal on it. If there isn't any out there, I think these things are close to $1,000, maybe a little below or above that nowadays. But that's what you're looking at if you want to buy one. If you build your own, you can definitely go cheaper. So, and you don't have to get the 3X or the super up to date, super duty whatever computer. If you just want to do a simple turbo kit and you don't have a whole bunch of other extra things you want to control, then the basic plug and play one works too, like what he did. How much did you buy yours for? 150 bucks?
No, I think
it was 200.
It was closer to almost 300, I think.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think maybe 240, 250. But what's really great about it is, just like you said, it's a plug and play. I don't have to do anything to it. So if you can afford something like that and you don't want to spend the time either searching forever or trying to build your own, it's a really, really great option to have.
Yeah, so things to consider. So that's the first thing on the car that to me is going to be the most important. And there's going to be a couple other things along with this that you want to install at the same time. So the next thing would be the Wideband O2 sensor. So when you install your Megasquirt, and we will be doing a video on how to do it, so if this video's been out for a while, it's probably going to be, the video will probably be up by now, so check the description. But along with this, you're going to be installing a Wideband O2 sensor at the same time. There's a couple options for that. There's the AEM one, and there is the Innovate. I will leave links in the description about that as well. And my Wideband is an Innovate. It's already in my car now, and I'm going to be doing a video on how to install that very soon as well. And then I also need to add a boost gauge. So you don't have to have a boost gauge, but come on, dude. You're turboing your car, and you're not going to have a fun boost gauge to tell you how much choo-choos you're making. So anyways, yeah, you're going to grab that. Yeah, how many choo-choos you're making. So there you go. There's my boost gauge. It's kind of a crappy one. I'll probably actually get a better one.
It doesn't do much though.
I know, but it was kind of bouncy. I didn't like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't a very good quality gauge. It was like an Equus gauge, but it worked. The other nice thing that I do like about having a boost gauge is it also reads vacuum. So engine vacuum is a good and important indicator of engine health and of just how the car is running. So anyways, let's move on to the next thing. And now the next thing to consider, once you have a Megasquirt in the car, or you have a Speeduino in the car, you have a Haltech in the car, you have whatever it is you have in the car, you want to start upgrading a few other things before you put the turbo in. One of those things is going to be your fuel. So I found with my kit, I was running on the stock fuel pump, and I had Works 600cc injectors, and I was maxing those out at about 220 to 230 horsepower. They were at full duty cycle, and I could not make more power. So I ended up, I think I could have gotten away with just upgrading my my injectors, and eventually I did that, but I also upgraded my fuel pump. So once you got the Megasquirt in the car, if you're trying to go for 250 plus horsepower, start looking at fuel pumps. I got this Works one here. It worked really well for me while I had it. Well, obviously I still have it, but you know, while I had that car and it was running in it. And yeah, I'll leave a link down in the description about that as well. And then the next thing we'll talk about is fuel injectors. We came closer because this is a really small item, but this is the fuel injectors. So these are the ones I ended up actually picking. There are Injector Dynamics 1000cc injectors. The cool thing also is they work with ethanol as well, so you can be using pump gas or ethanol if you want to make that upgrade eventually. And I just want to tell you, I would not even bother picking any other ones because before I had the Works 600cc ones in there, they ran good and the car idled and drove well with it. But I was kind of, when you go up in size in injectors, especially back in the old days, a lot of times you were sacrificing a little bit of drivability and a little bit of idle quality. And I got rid of the 600cc injectors, put these 1000cc injectors in, which are huge for a 4-cylinder. And I'm thinking, you know, well, it's gonna get worse. No, it got better. These things, I guess it's the spray pattern on them. But they legitimately idle better than the stock idle did. They idle better than the stock injectors did with the stock computer, whatever. I was expecting them to, like I said, to be worse than the Works ones. But anyways, I highly recommend these Injector Dynamics ones. They're freaking awesome and I love them. I could tell literally the moment I cranked the car when I put these in it, I went into the Megasquirt and I changed my settings to adjust for the size of the injector, and it idled like, it purred like a kitten. And the first time I even hit the throttle and I you know, let the clutch out to take off from a stop, it was like so smooth and so much better. So those are good ones. I know there's other options out there, and there's different prices on them. I'm gonna kind of leave it up to you guys to do your own research on these and look up the parts, look up the prices. But other ones worth mentioning, like I said, are the Injector Dynamics ones, and then there's a Flow Force, and I don't know, I'm sure there's more than that I'm forgetting right now. Sorry, it's kind of been a while. I've been out of the Miata game for a little bit because my car had been parked. So anyways, let's move on to the next thing. All right, so the next thing, and maybe the biggest thing of all that you're gonna wanna pick out in this project is your turbo and which one you wanna use. There's also a lot of options out there for this. You can go with the Borg-Warner turbo, you can go with the Garrett turbo, and then even if just between those two companies, there's different sizes you can choose. You could also go with a CX Racing turbo, and the truth is, honestly, nowadays, a lot of the Chinese turbos are a lot better than they used to be and work pretty dang well. And you can get ball bearing ones too, so your spool's nice and fast. Now, I went with a Garrett 2560R, and this thing was awesome with the 1.8 liter, so that's another thing to consider if you have a 1.6 or a 1.8. The truth is they both can make about the same amount of power at the same or similar boost levels. They both fail at around 250 or above 250. If you go too high, then you start breaking piston rods. And the 1.6 and the 1.8 share piston rods. So that's the limiting factor on both engines. But either way, just keep in mind what size you want to go with. So this is like, as far as Garrett options go for the Miata, this is kind of like a middle of the road option. The spool up time's pretty good on the 1.8. If I got the GT 54R, that one would spool even faster, but it would start running out of juice once I got closer to 250 horsepower. I know Greg Peters on the Car Passion channel, actually I think he got his 2554R up to about 300 horsepower, but he had to work pretty hard to get there. But it is possible, and I think he was on ethanol when he did it too. I don't remember for sure, but in any case, it is possible, but it's another thing to consider. So I've been really happy with this turbo. It's awesome, and I picked this thing up for 500 bucks used, and I think I got it off of somebody that was using it on a race car, and they used it for 1 season and sold it. You know what? It's worked great for me, and when I got it, it almost looked like it was brand new out of the case. Like there was just a little bit of soot on the exhaust side, you know, as there would be since it's used. But otherwise, this thing actually looked a lot better than it does right now after I got my dirty hands on it. So anyways, think about which turbo you want. A couple other things to consider when you're picking your turbo is you're going to need oil lines to feed the oil, and if you have a water-cooled turbo, which I recommend doing, then you're going to need coolant lines also to cool it off. Different turbos might use different fittings and stuff, so just keep all that in mind, and that will, I guess, lead me to the next thing, which you see on the the turbo, I have my oil drain line already on here. I think my feed line's somewhere on a shelf over there. I couldn't find it. And then these are my coolant lines that I had feeding water to and from the turbo to keep it cooled off. So just keep that in mind when you're picking your turbo out. Those are other things that you're going to need, and you need to make sure you figure out, you know, what parts you're going to use for that as well. So I think I got the drain from, it was either from Bell Engineering or Flying Miata. I don't remember which now, but you know, it's a simple part. We'll go over more of that stuff later when we actually get to a video installing the turbo, but for now, things to think about and things to consider and plan out. So like I said before, I recommend starting a spreadsheet, and then you can list the parts you want, you can list the prices of them, and you can have a, you know, like a wish list, and you can, you know, have links to where you want to go, whatever. If you want to see how we did it, go check out that video. But let's go ahead and move on to the next things. So these things kind of go hand in hand. Depending on which turbo you get is also, it could potentially decide which manifold you get, because you might have a flange on one turbo that wouldn't fit a manifold, or vice versa. And I went with Flying Miata for this one. I've been really happy with it. It's a really well-known and well-proven design. I got the kit, I think it was around $700, and that came with the manifold and the downpipe, and the downpipe's like 2 sections, so it has a section that bolts on the back of the turbo, and their kits were pretty much made for the Garrett turbos, the 2554R, 2560R like I had, and the other one above it, I forget right now. But my point is, when you're doing a DIY kit, there's a lot of options out there. eBay occasionally has some options available. I would definitely recommend just going with a cast iron one though, because do not be fooled and go on eBay or CX Racing or other places and see those steel, you know, pipe welded ones that are, you know, welded together. All of them crack eventually. If you're having any sort of fun with your car, that turbo is going to get hot and your exhaust is going to get hot, and those things all crack. These cast iron ones hold up a lot better, and the truth is, they make power just fine. I think Flying Miata made like 600 plus horsepower with one of these manifolds on one of their race cars. Wow. So, you know, don't be fooled. Like obviously, yeah, if you're getting into the crazy, real nice tubular exhausts and you want to get the best spool time and this and that, there probably is some benefits out there. But the thing is, it's a diminishing return on those benefits. And if you're a good welder and you really know what you're doing and you can put that together and make it work, awesome. Or if you want to spend the extra money and buy a quality one, also awesome, but those quality ones are like $1,000 or more each sometimes, or at least several $100s. Versus I got $700 for this and the downpipes, and was there something else? I think it was just that and the downpipe. And the downpipe's 2 sections. So anyways, that would be the next thing after this. You don't really need to see the downpipe, but that would be another thing to consider that you need to add onto your list. After you have your downpipe off of the turbo figured out, you're going to need to figure the rest of your exhaust out. Could you set it up and hook something up to use the stock exhaust? Yes, and you can buy parts to do that if you want to. I know Flying Miata and Bell Engineering sell stuff like that, but your turbo is going to spool faster and you're going to make more power if you go up in size on your exhaust. That's just how it is. So what I personally did was have that. Let me think. I had that, and then I had the downpipes from Flying Miata, and then I went to an exhaust shop and I just had them weld me up like a 3-inch exhaust all the way back, and done. And it only cost, when I went to the shop and had them do that, I had to drive it over there and hope I didn't get pulled over by a cop, because it was just like straight piped out of the downpipe. But I made it over there, and then I think they only charged me like $200 or something. It's really not that expensive to get a simple exhaust work done. And yeah, so let's move on to the next items. And the next thing you're gonna need is an intercooler.
But not this one.
Yeah, not that one. That was the one that was in my old car when it got wrecked, which I didn't wreck it, somebody else did, but this is what is left of it. And I have a new one sitting in a box that hasn't been touched, sitting on the shelf, waiting to go. So you're going to need to pick your intercooler out. There's also a ton of options out there on this. You can spend a lot of money, you can spend a little money. This is one of the things that personally I think you can definitely save a lot of money on by just getting an eBay one or a CX Racing one. This was a CX Racing one. It made the power, it worked just fine, no problems with it. I know a lot of people advertise different styles, different ways they have the core set up that'll flow better or cool better. It's always a case of diminishing returns though. This one was what, 2.5 inches thick or 2 inches? It was 2.5 or 3 inches thick. And that length. Maybe there's a small amount of increase in efficiency if you went with a more expensive one, but this thing didn't have any problems and it only cost about 120 bucks or something like that. I don't know if the prices have changed in the last few years, but I still wouldn't expect, if you went on the CX Racing site, to find an intercooler, it's gonna fit and work for you for less than $200. And to go along with your intercooler, you obviously are going to need an intercooler piping to feed it and to feed your engine. So depending on which turbo you get, some turbos might have a different outlet size from the compressor housing. 2 inches, 2.5 inches, maybe if you went with a crazy turbo, 3 inches. I wouldn't do that personally though. Mine was 2.5 inches, or I think actually I converted it. I think the turbo outlet at the compressor is 2 inches, and then I got a silicone coupling that went up to 2.5, and then the rest of my system was 2.5 inches. So figure out what sizes you're gonna wanna use. If you wanna stick with 2 inches, that's fine. 2.5 flows a little bit better, but I think some people might argue there might be a little bit more lag for the air to move through the motor. Dude, it works. I'm not gonna like argue with anybody about it, but it worked for me. My turbo spooled super fast and gave me power quick when I stomped on it. I was happy with it. Another thing to consider is a blow-off valve. The problem with cheap blow-off valves, especially if you're running on the stock computer, is the cheap ones sometimes can leak. They'll give you an intake leak where you can see air getting into the engine that was not measured by the airflow meter. Now, if you're not running on the stock computer and using an airflow meter, it's really not a problem, not a big problem. It's a little bit of unfiltered air, so you can take that into consideration. This is an HKS one, so it wasn't a super cheap one, but this is something I will say you could probably get away with a cheaper one, because if you're running on a Speeduino or a Megasquirt or whatever other ECU you picked, it should be running off a MAP. And that's going off of the air intake temperature, which you're gonna have that on the, mounted on here. I think I had it on, I don't know. I think it was on maybe another pipe going up to the manifold. Oh, it was mounted on here, right here. But you're gonna need an air intake temp sensor, and then you have a MAP sensor built into the ECU, and that's how your computer calculates the amount of airflow coming into the motor. And if there's a small leak coming through the blow-off valve, it's not actually that big of a deal because it's not changing your manifold pressure at all. So the blow-off valve's goal at the end of the day is to help your turbo continue to spool faster, because if you shut your, if you're changing gears, you let off the gas and shut your throttle, all that air has nowhere to go and then gets backfed through the turbo. It makes really fun and cool noises, but it slows your turbo down. Some people might say that it's bad for the turbo or it could cause damage to it. I'm not so worried about that as so much as I am. It actually does slow it down and it makes it take longer to spool up. So, you let off the throttle, go into the next gear and get on it again, and it takes longer to build up the boost. Versus if you have a blow-off valve, it should build boost up almost immediately when you hit the throttle again. So, anyways, is there anything else we have sitting over there?
Not on this cart.
Okay. So I think that actually was pretty much it. I don't really have anything else here on the shelf at the time to show you, and I'm sure there's probably some small details out there that I didn't mention, but do your research. If you're gonna be doing this kind of thing by yourself, and you don't have an expert there to help you, you need to spend some time researching what you need to do, and hopefully watching this video is part of it. It definitely lets you know what is out there, what you're gonna need and what to start looking for, but there's a lot more to learn and there's a lot more to know. And yeah, so on top of all the things we already said, if you're planning on turboing your car, just remember there's other things to think about too. If you're gonna be adding all that extra power, you need to probably upgrade your tires so you're not slipping and skidding everywhere. And if you're gonna be driving fast, you wanna have a good amount of grip, so don't cheap out on cheap, crappy tires unless you just wanna go drifting for fun, because then you do want cheap, crappy tires that don't grip, because you're just having fun. But anyway, more major things actually though to consider is the differentials. So if you have a 1.6 liter, all of those differentials are pretty weak. The stock 1.6 open diff is like a piece of glass that'll shatter as soon as you throw any boost at it. And then the viscous limited slip diff that they had as an option on those, it was a bit stronger, it could take power a little better, but the truth is almost all those things they're 30 years old now pretty much, or almost, and they're probably, the way those differentials worked, they're probably not working as a limited slip anymore. So it's basically just an open diff. It's a little stronger than the 1.6 one was. So you're gonna want to upgrade to a 1.8 diff and preferably a torsion because you want that limited slip action. You don't want to be one tire fire all the way down the street, and we have a video on that, so if you want to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description for that as well. We did go over how to install a 1.8 torsion differential into a 1.6 Miata. In any case, and that would work also if you had a 1.8 open and you wanted to swap the torsion into it. Anyway, other things to consider is your clutch. The stock clutch will not take a whole bunch of power. If you were to only go for like 150 to 180, it might last a while and it might work out okay. But if you're going over 200, you're gonna blow that clutch out like super fast. And it's probably smarter just to upgrade it ahead of time. Get something that you are comfortable with dailying every day, but something that also will take the power more. Personally, I have an ACT in mind. It's a 6-puck clutch, and I will be honest and say it's a bit heavy and harsh for street use to use every single day. I previously had the ACT heavy duty, so it was the single plate clutch, and I had the same pressure plate as this. I kind of prefer the stiffer pedal, and I like that about it. But that one wasn't quite as like immediate as the 6-puck clutch I have now. That's unsprung also, by the way. So if you want to learn how to swap a clutch in your car, we have a video on that too. We did a flying Miata clutch on Matthew's car, and that thing actually, yeah, that thing works good. Do you like it?
I love it. It's great.
So done, dude. Freaking out, and we're good to go.
It's not a hard decision to make.
There's a lot of clutches out there, so I'm not going to tell you all the options, but just keep in mind that's something else you're going to want to upgrade to. Another thing is brakes. I did not do my brakes ahead of time when I turboed my white car. I was still running on stock brakes. Pretty much as soon as I got to like that 200 power mark, anytime I went out to have fun with the car and hit a canyon, I overheated my brakes in like less than 3 minutes. Like 3 to 5 minutes of heavy, hard driving, and my brakes were cooked, and I had to slow down and be careful and let them cool off because I was losing them. So if you're not racing on a track, you could probably get away with just upgrading your pads, your fluid, and your brake lines, and you'd be all right. If you do plan on driving real hard, or you're gonna be doing it for track use, don't mess around, upgrade your brakes to bigger ones. I'm using the sport brakes, and that's another thing to think about. If you have an ND, or not an ND, that's the newest one, duh. An NB. If you have an NB and you have the sport brake package on that already, then you're probably gonna be good to go with a good set of rotors, pads, fluid, and I like using the stainless steel lines too. But if you have 1.6 car like I did, those brakes are tiny, so you're going to want to upgrade them, and I did, and it made a huge difference. I went with Hawk HPS Plus, or what, no, the HP Plus pads, and then I have some like Power Stop drilled and slotted rotors because they look cool, man. And what else? And I used the NB Miata Sport brake package on it with braided stainless lines. And is there anything else I upgraded? I don't think so. I think I'm just using regular .4 with it actually from Napa. But those things work awesome. I have tried, and I know this car's not turbo yet, but trust me, I've driven it hard enough times. I, so far, have not been able to overheat these things if I try. They work very well, and it was a really affordable way to go. So if you want to find out how I did mine, check that video out as well. One more thing to keep in mind, suspension. It's not required, obviously. You could just keep rolling around on the stock suspension, but with the extra power, if you're gonna be driving faster, you might wanna have a little bit more control, and you know, I mean, I did, obviously. I wanted it to handle better and have more control. So I upgraded to what I have now. I have the Bilstein PSS9 coilovers, and I have Flying Miata sway bars, and I also have a bunch of chassis stiffening and other stuff too. That's another thing to think about when you're adding a bunch of power. The Miata is like a limp noodle and twists and twists when you're driving it, so you're probably going to want to stiffen your chassis up. And the Flying Miata frame rails are awesome. They're a very reasonable price, and they make a huge difference. I feel like they even make a bigger difference than adding sway bars does. But it might depend on your driving style and how experienced you are, whether you notice or feel it in the car or not. But either way, another thing to consider. And we have videos on all those also, so if you haven't seen them, you know, go check them out. We got videos on how to do coilovers, how to do sway bars, how to do chassis bracing with the frog arms we did, and we did the sway bars, and, or did I say sway? I meant frame rails. Clutch, yeah, whatever. We have videos for all that stuff.
Brakes,
so,
big brake kit.
Yeah, I mentioned that already.
Oh, sorry.
Come on, dude. We're good, bro. We already told them. So I think that's about it, man.
Yeah, so like Jesse said, we have videos on a lot of these things that you're going to be considering. In addition to that, we know you guys are going to have a ton of questions, or maybe you won't, but you probably will. So if you do have a question, even if it's on a specific product,
I try to answer them.
or a route or something like that, definitely drop it below. We'd love to not only hear your opinion, but see your questions as well, and see where you guys are having a point of concern or a point of interest. And we'd love to even possibly make a video about something specific if everybody has the same question over and over. We can do that as well.
I do my best to answer people's questions, and if you have a video that's feasible for us to do, then I will try and do it. If you have an idea or a question or something you want to see. If you got some outlandish, crazy thing you want to see, good luck, bro.
Off-road Miatas.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet.
One day.
Maybe. We'll see. But anyways, I think that's about it for this video. So thank you guys very much for joining us and hanging out for this. I know it's kind of a long video, but had a lot to say and a lot of things to show you and a lot of things to share. So I appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And I don't know, is that it?
I think that's it. Like Jesse said, we appreciate you watching. Don't forget to like and comment and subscribe if you want more content from us. And I think that's it. Don't forget, keep wrenching.